Hello. I am standing in my parents' kitchen here in Scotland with a golf club and a cup of coffee and a tremendous sense of gratitude because I passed the 1,000 subscribers mark this week or last week. It was just before I flew out of Kuwait. I had some people reach out to me and say, congratulations on 1,000 subscribers. And I don't think I dealt with it very well. I kind of brushed those compliments aside. But please note if that was you, my gratitude is equal to my inability to take a compliment. And I don't take it lightly. So thank you so much. Anyway, when I realized I was being a little bit glib about the 1,000 subscribers thing, I realized actually it is something to celebrate. So I did ask for some questions. What are your questions for me as I reach this momentous milestone? So what I have in front of me is about 15 questions that I got from various people. And I've kind of barricaded them into 3 different categories. So category 1 is travel and life. We'll begin with that. Category 2 is books. And category 3 is like this miscellaneous hodgepodge of stuff. Do you know what? I take it back. It's way too warm for this blanket. Right, okay. Do you know what? Let's start with the travel and the life ones first. So the first question is, what did you study at university? So the long story short is that I graduated with a degree in English literature, and I also have a postgraduate degree in international education. However, the longer answer is I went to university to study to be a journalist. I actually was taking English with journalism and creative writing, and it wasn't until the final year of my course that I actually dropped the journalism part. We had this lecturer come in, like this guest lecturer, and the topic was what to do if you can't find a story. You have this deadline at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and you can't find anything to write about. What do you do? And this journalist used a real world example from his own career, and the example was using Twitter. And what he said was, go online, type in something disastrous, see if someone has tweeted it, and then find that person and interview them. And he used the example of the royal family. One of the royal family members was pregnant at the time, and he found some idiot who tweeted something along the lines of, I hope this baby doesn't make it. He went to this kid's house, this teenager, and he said, what do you have to say for yourself? And that's how he got the story for the day. And I hated this story. I hated it so much. Everything about this was nasty. Every single person in this story was nasty. And I remember walking out of that lecture with a real sense of deflation and questioning whether this was for me. Obviously, I'm not saying every journalist is like that. You have really talented people in the field who are uncovering stories and interviewing people. World situations right now, there's floods of journalists going into these areas and defying death to bring the truth of people's experiences to as many people as possible. But something soured in me that day when I heard that story, and it was gradually me realizing that journalism was not for me as a profession and kind of finding that off-ramp into teaching. So I got my English degree, went to Japan for a few years, realized I wanted to be a teacher, and then kind of got all the documentation and degrees necessary to fulfill that step. I hope that was a somewhat good answer for you. That took me 5 minutes, so I don't know how I'm going to get through 15 questions. Right, question number 2. Could you provide a general sense of your age without being specific? Mate, I'm 31. I'm old. If I take these glasses off, you're going to see those bags there. I had a student in my last job saw me take my glasses off, and he looked at me, he went, "Sir, I didn't know you looked like that." So yeah, I'm 31. People often think I'm a bit younger, which is fine. I don't mind that, except when I'm actually teaching, because then it's a bit of an issue. Because I have had the experience of walking into a classroom in a new job, being mistaken for a student, and teachers telling me off or coming in and wondering where the real teacher was. It's a bit awkward. The real issue is my inability to grow facial hair. If I could just bring this down a little bit, I feel like I'd get some gravitas. And you know what? The golf club doesn't help either, does it? Question 3. Would you consider writing a book? I mean, if I could write a good one. One thing I love about BookTube is everyone seems to be writing a book, and I seem to be the only one who's not. And I kind of feel a bit left out, man. But I find that when I write fiction, in particular, it just doesn't cohere. And it's really interesting because I know what I want from other people's fiction. I can read someone's fiction and say, that's right, that's wrong. Here's a suggestion. I can do all that. But when it comes to my own writing, I just look at it and cringe. And that's especially pervasive with fiction. I do write a little bit in my own time. I quite enjoy writing poetry, although I haven't for ages, and it's rubbish. But for some reason, it doesn't really seem to matter to me that it's rubbish, in the same way that rubbish fiction, my own rubbish fiction, does seem to matter to me. I also enjoy writing a diary, a journal, something like that, kind of recollections of my own day, especially when my son says something funny or I'm traveling and something really interesting happens. And I find that my description and my scenes and things like that, what I'm narrating from my own life, comes across a lot more strongly and robustly, is that a word, than when I'm writing fiction. I don't know why that is. Maybe I'm just obsessed with myself. What would you say to past David? And what would you say to future David? That is a really... Oh, okay. How emotionally raw are we going to get with this? Don't take up golf. That's what I'd say. Um, hmm. I imagine future David would say to present David, enjoy your children, enjoy your family, enjoy your marriage. Sometimes I can get hung up on the details of what's important. You know, I'll get home and I'll say to my wife, like, I have this stack of marking to do and it must be done by tomorrow. Or I have to get this to the post office today. And there's always something that I have to be doing. It feels like I wake up and I always make this big tier list and it's stratified in order of importance. And sometimes I do that and I forget that I have a small child just there who wants to play with me. And I really feel that right now because I don't have my family for this month. I'm going to Japan soon to get things set up over there. And my family are in the States, seeing my in-laws' family, and I miss them. It's a good reminder for me to keep that close and remember that is always of utmost primacy. Just realized I probably should have put these dishes away before I started this video, but hey, my mum's told me she doesn't watch my videos, so it's fine. This is like my micro revenge, huh? What would I say to past David, though? I was that guy in high school. I was that guy in high school who had to get the highest score. Had to. Don't know why. I wasn't that bright, but I always wanted to. I obsessed over every nook and cranny. Same thing in university. I obsessed over every nook and cranny of the essays that I was writing. I reread those bad boys 7, 8, 9 times to make sure that I didn't have a single typo. I thought that was really important. And again, de-stress, man. I think that's what the heart of this question from both sides is telling me. Listen, don't get hung up on the things that don't really matter. That essay does not need to be read for the 8th time. If my students are listening to this, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Get back to work. There are more important things in life. And although these things are important, they are not, again, of utmost primacy, are they? Okay, we're on to the travel ones. There's 2 travel ones. If you can combine 3 non-fictional cities into one, what would they be and why? Well, that's a good question. St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg was probably the most beautiful city I've ever been to in my life. You know how when you Google a city, like if you Google Glasgow right now, you're going to get the same 2 or 3 pictures over and over again. You're going to get the university, you're going to get George Square, and you're probably going to get the West End kind of parks and stuff. You're going to get the same repetition of scenery. And if you Google Paris, right, you're going to get Notre Dame, Eiffel Tower, Arc de Triomphe. Same things. When I went to St. Petersburg, I was floored because every single street in that city centre felt like the most beautiful street that all the pictures should be taken of. It was marvellous. Athens? When I walk around Athens, I say that like I've done it a lot, I've done it once. When I walked around Athens, I had this marvellous feeling of how deep history goes, how deep it goes. You know, you're walking and you're seeing a statue or something that's been there for 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and that's just baked into the culture. And I really love experiencing places where the history runs deep. Shanghai. Shanghai, number 3. Listen, I would live in China if it wasn't for China. These big, gorgeous, and they were gorgeous, the gorgeous skyscrapers lighting up at night. You walk around that river, the Bund area, and you see this whole kind of skyline light up in front of you, and it's bouncing off the water and it's bouncing off the puddles, and people are walking and holding hands and just having a wonderful time in this cityscape. I love that too. So combine Shanghai and Athens and St. Petersburg into a city, and you have a weird mishmash that might just be something that I really like. Right, last one from Travel Life. Best, worst country or travel experience. So, I mean, worst is when I've gotten sick. Worst is always when you get sick and you're traveling. So Bahrain. Do you know what it is? You know when you get sick and you're trying to convince yourself you're not sick. So maybe you wake up in the night and you feel a bit shivery, or you start to kind of just do that kind of feverish, sensitive thing that your skin gets when you're getting sick, and you just barrel on through. I was doing that. It took about 24 hours for me to admit, you know what, I think I need to go to bed. And I was in bed for 2 or 3 days in this hotel in Bahrain with 2 small children jumping on me, my children. And then also, like, we were there for 3 days. We were there for 5 days, but I got sick for 3 days. I then had to feverishly take a plane home, and I was sick for another 3 days. It was the worst, like, feverish ordeal I had in my life. Best? No, you know what? Let's do the States. I studied for a year in the States, and I had a month and change of time left on my visa. So rather than flying straight home, age 20, and this was my first big independent travel venture, I spent about a month traveling around the US, and I saw Washington, DC, New York City, Seattle, San Francisco, Portland, New Mexico, Phoenix, Colorado. I saw all these wonderful places. And for me, it wasn't just that it was a medley of genuinely fantastic cities. I think sometimes Americans look at stuff like Europe and decide that that's where everything is, but Seattle's fabulous. San Francisco was fabulous. So there was that element to it, but also it was the time that showed me that I was capable of traveling by myself. I was very shy as a kid. I don't know if I've mentioned that. I was extremely shy as a kid. When people used to call my name in the back of the classroom to try and get my attention, I would just pretend they weren't talking to me and I wouldn't turn around because I was so nervous. I don't know why I went to university to be a journalist. But for me, to do that month-long experience completely by myself and have fun doing it showed me that travel was for me and I could do it independently. And I always hesitate bringing up travel on my channel because I know that there's some immense privilege that goes with being able to do these trips. Do you know what? Let me know if you'd like more travel stories in the future or if that's something to keep to myself, because I would be curious to hear some thoughts there. But now, let's move on to books. And some of these are going to be easier than others. Have you read the Witcher series? Yes, and I didn't like it. That's not true. I love the Witcher games. I've played all 3 Witcher games all the way through. I watched season 1 of the Netflix adaptation, and it was fine. It was okay. It was a bit weirdly MTV quality. I read the 2 short story collections, and I liked them. I had a good time with them, but I've heard that is the best of what Sapkowski's Witcher novels have to offer. So I wasn't very interested in continuing after that, because if that's the best, and I kind of found it like a lower G good, there was nothing wrong with it, nothing hugely wrong with it. I figured that was, again, a good time for me to take that off-ramp. When are you going to read The Spear That Cuts Through Water? Right now. Just kidding. I don't know, soon. It's not really on my to-do list. But it's not something I'm adverse to either. There's no plans, but there's no animosity either. Next question. What is the gold standard for fantasy adaptations? The Dark Tower 2017. Just kidding, I hate that movie. Right. Imagine you take the 7 Harry Potter books and you line them all up and then you squish them down to 90 minutes of runtime and you just call it Harry Potter. That is what happened to the Dark Tower. It is a catastrophe of movie making. I imagine there were so many cooks making that movie that they all added their teaspoon of their own thing and it came out as an absolute mess. And The Dark Tower, if you haven't read it, is one of the best, most vibrant, lively, inventive stories out in fantasy even now. So the fact that it got such an egregious adaptation is genuinely horrific. Horrific. And it's so bad that I took this positive question of what is the best adaptation and I've turned it into the worst because I hate it so much. Best, I think it has, people will say Lord of the Rings, people will say Game of Thrones season 1 through 4. And you know what? I think that's fair. Game of Thrones season 1 through 4 is perfect encapsulation of what those books are trying to do, and in some ways taking it even further. Game of Thrones was the only adaptation to memory that I've watched before I read the books, and it was so good that I don't regret doing it in that order. Okay, next. What popular book do you suspect you won't like? Oh, burning some bridges here. Do you know what? And I could be totally wrong. The Bound and the Broken. And it's not because I think it's going to be badly written, but I've heard people compare it to other things that I'm not hugely enamored with. So stuff like kind of Wheel of Time, that more traditional vein of fantasy. So Ryan Cahill, if you're watching this, I do apologize. I would love to be proven wrong. I've not read a single page of what you've written, but I would probably say the Bound and the Broken is where I would probably go with that answer. Next, do you think people should build up a reading base before tackling Malazan? Well, Malazan fans are the most intelligent people on the face of the earth, and we know it, so yes. No. What kind of? So, I don't think you need to have a bunch of fantasy under your belt to like Malazan, or enjoy Malazan, or get the fullest experience out of Malazan. I don't think you have to go through the Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings, whatever, Dungeon Crawler Carl, Fonda Lee, Robin Hobb, all these authors to get to Malazan, as if Malazan is somehow the pinnacle of fantasy. I don't think that's a good way of looking at it. Sometimes I think we Malazan fans treat Malazan as the top of the hill that everything else is leading towards, like it's some kind of fruition or culmination of the genre in a way that sort of puts the other works as subsidiary or peripheral or just leading towards that ultimate adventure. I really think that's a disservice to the genre as a whole. However, I would probably say that you should not make Malazan just your first book, full stop. And last, on the books pile, what are your 5 TBR Desert Island books? What a good little question. I already did a Desert Island discussion on a previous book tag, but I like the nuance to this question, which is it's got to be books you haven't read yet. So I've got 4 here, and I've got one in my brain. The one in my brain is The Wandering Inn. I love The Wandering Inn. It's long, it's lengthy. I could probably, if I took The Wandering Inn on a desert island, take all that paper, smoosh it into a boat, paper mache my way out of there. But that's kind of cheating. I've also got the major works of Percy Shelley. I think having a nice collection of poetry will tide me over, pun intended. So Percy Shelley's the first thing that was on my list. I also have the complete works of Milton, which would work very well. I say that like I'm very well read. I've not read a page of Percy Shelley. Perdido Street Station keeps getting recommended to me by China Mayville. Again, I'm kind of going for length here as well as quality. And I think I don't want to read any of it and spoil it for myself, huh? Perdido Street Station would also very much fill that niche, as well as the 2 historical novels that I've got here that I want to get to by year's end. So I have Ken Follett's The Pillars of the Earth. I've heard it's very good. And then in a similar vein again, Shogun by James Clavell, I've heard is amazing, and it's historical, and I've heard it's very layered with lots of subtextual. Did I just say it's very historical? It's a historical novel. But I've heard great things about Shogun. Apparently the adaptation is fabulous as well. So those would be my 5 answers there. And look at the level of preparation I've put into this video. More than normal. I had my books ready. Whenever I see other booktubers sort of go, and then the next one I want to read is this, I'm like, oh, you remembered to bring your books. Teach me your ways. So the final 5 I've just labeled as kind of generally miscellaneous. Booktube, other kind of niche lifey things. The first one, is it true that there are no true Scotsmen? Well, I'm half Irish, so I can't really help with that. Do you think I'm cool? Shay, always? Always and forever? What will be your first big booktube scandal? Ooh. You know what? I shudder to think about that. I do. I feel like I'm pretty squeaky clean, as people go. I did have a minor scandal last week when I posted my TBR for the rest of the year, and people had discovered that I hadn't read Lord of the Rings. I guess, and I suppose this is still a bit of a tangential answer to the question. But it's also an insight into who I am, so you can forgive me. I feel very conscious of my words coming out wrong in general, or being misinterpreted. Does that make sense? Like I had this even when I didn't have a channel, I was just commenting. And as a teacher, I'm very conscious of this as well, that how you present yourself is not always the way that something is received, right? So like, for example, maybe I'm teaching in a classroom and I say something that I think is a joke to sort of lighten the mood. Some student might be hurt by that. Or maybe I'll say something in a video that I think is a kind of a light jab at a book that I don't think is high quality, like Empire of Silence, and someone will actually get properly annoyed at that. I'm always aware that my words might not kind of make it through that semiotic breach into someone else's brain in a way that I have intended for it to come across. So again, this is not like a huge scandal, but I'm always quite concerned that I'm not coming across the way I want to, that I'm coming across as a bit trite, or a bit glib, or that I'm not listening to someone. And that I find a bit nerve-wracking at times. Is that okay? Is that okay to say? Is this 1,000 subscribers Q&A or a therapy session? Yeah, I guess that's where I'd go with that. What was your favorite book from 2018? Don't look. That's a good one. Where was I in 20? Oh, I know what it is. It's The Terror. The Terror by Dan Simmons. I've spoken about The Terror before on this channel. I think it's a phenomenal book. Wait, no, I read Hyperion in 2018 too. Which is better, Hyperion or The Terror? Hyperion. Hang on. My beautiful broken binding edition of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Delighted to get this. I did a live stream with Shay the other night, and we did a big unboxing of all the books that I've had for me in storage the last 2 years. And one of the ones that put the biggest smile on my face was Hyperion. I've told the story about me being in an Airbnb, motion activated lights, and doing this so I could keep reading. So I won't tell that story for the 4th time. But what I will tell you is a year ago, I actually reached out to Dan Simmons and I said to him, thank you so much for all these amazing, amazing books. And that great versatility of writing style that he has that has allowed him to make so many different books. I just said to him, thank you. And he was kind enough to respond, Dan Simmons. And so I don't know if The Fifth Heart, which was his most recent book, will be his final book. If it is, his work has meant a great deal to me, and I'm deeply appreciative of his stuff, with Hyperion being the crowning jewel in that set of works. And the last question probably should have been the first. What made you want to turn on a camera and start a channel? Do you know, there is no way of, I'm shouting, there's no way of addressing this question without it coming across as incredibly sweet and saccharine. But I genuinely have been just enamored with my time on BookTube. Not all of it has been, smelling the roses. There have been pitfalls and things along the way. There was one video I made very early on that I looked at and deleted because I was so racked with indecision and lack of confidence about it. But in general, it's just been really, really enjoyable. And the thing that I have just found the best, something I'm just so grateful for, is that sense of community that I have been allowed to be a part of. The fact that I can chat to so many booktubers and authors and people in the comments, and some of my friends in real life who started to watch my channel and are talking to me about it. There's a social element to BookTube, which I have been lucky enough to be involved in. I always thought that BookTube kind of feels from the outside like you have your lunch tray, you're in high school with your lunch tray and you're trying to find a table to sit with. Like, can I sit with you? Can I sit with you? And it's not been like that for me. Everyone has been so wonderful and warm and welcoming. And I'm sure some of you are terrible people, but I haven't found you yet. So in the meantime, I started my channel just to have a space to talk about books. And I guess the extension of that, and the thing that I found such joy in, is that I've been able to talk about books with other people. It's been back and forth. It's been communicative. And I think that's a wonderful moment to end this video on. Thank you so much for 1,000 subscribers. If you watch me wittering into my camera, which isn't even a camera, it's a phone, the technical difficulties will persist, I believe, for another few months. Thank you so much. It means a lot. And I'm smiling and happy and grateful to have this tiny wee platform where I can talk about a passion of mine that before this year I have not been able to talk about. This does sound very sweet and saccharine, doesn't it? I'm grateful to you all. I don't take you lightly, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye.